Justin, what did you think? Just quick thoughts.
Quick thoughts, really good overall, but this is a Nintendo showcase and particularly a hardware showcase, so there's going to be some really good, there's going to be some real annoying stuff too, and boy, this presentation and some of the news we found out afterwards made me pretty angry, but I'm also very excited because, Nintendo, they just got that, they got you by the balls. They're going to get you, even if they do something, even if they spit in your face, they got you.
They sure do, man. They do got us by the balls.
Yeah. Even if they spit in your face, they got you.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another Xvault gaming video. Xvault here, and today we're going to do a thoughts from the vault here because we have some more things to cover and address in regards to the Nintendo Switch 2. I have some follow-up thoughts, some follow-up developments, so to speak. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump to it. Alright, so like I was saying, what we're going to do is get to the meat of the matter here in regards to the Nintendo Switch 2, some follow-up stories and some findings out, so to speak, in regards to what's going on here. So let's start off with some if they, will they, won't they kind of scenario here. And we're talking about tariffs, we're talking about what the ultimate price of the Nintendo Switch is going to be. As far as the US is concerned, it is looking like this could be upwards of $700. Perhaps this isn't written in stone. We're just waiting to see what kind of happens and what's going on there. But we did find out that there are no tariffs involved in regards to the original price point of it being $450 or $500, depending if it's the Mario Kart bundle and stuff like that. Some folks were speculating. I was kind of keeping my mouth shut because I didn't know for a fact if that's the case. I don't have the wherewithal to know that. I'm not into that sort of scene as far as what that looks like, but we do have confirmation that was in regards to no tariffs whatsoever. With tariffs, like I just mentioned, upwards could be of $700 or so, or around that ballpark range. So keep an eye on that. If you are a US citizen, we might have to look forward to that if you are still looking to pick up a Nintendo Switch. Something else to keep in mind, I know I went over the fact that, the Switch cartridges, not all of them are going to have the games directly on them. We had the scenario where if you're out and about and picking up a game, it's not a guarantee. You're going to have to do your research in regards to see if it's just a game key, so to speak, and you need to download that before you can play it or whatever the case is. But just for a quick example here, I do want to share a couple screens here. So this gentleman was very excited to pick up one of his first copies anyways, physical copies for Nintendo Switch 2. He's talking about, with Jordan here, welp, I just pre-ordered my first Switch 2 game. Did it 5% off with the Jordan 2025 code, of course, game on cart, according to Play Asia. And, not a horrible price, I think, especially for a Suikoden right now. I can only find it digitally for PlayStation anyways, upwards of $40, so I don't think that's a bad deal. And then, of course, he comes back and states, as you can see, ruined, now it's a game key. So again, one of those scenarios where you're looking for those that are collectors, that you want physical prowess and stuff like that. This is going to make it very difficult. And again, something to keep in mind is in the future, games are going to be more and more digital, so hold on to those physical copies. If you want physical to stay around, just a little word of advice or whatever, buy your physical games as much and as often as you can. If it makes sense to you, if you're a collector, even if you're not and you still want physical to stick around, if it makes sense to pick up that physical copy, definitely do so. If you're not doing some sort of digital game sharing and stuff like that, definitely pick up physical all you can, special editions, still, all that stuff. As it is, we do have steelbooks and other special editions across the board that are becoming more and more digital. So it's a niche feature at this point, I'm feeling, as time goes on. But again, just another tip of the hat from Nintendo here in regards to that. Now, the other part of this is the fact that we're going to bring up, again, if we're talking about $700, I just want to preface this, and I'm not trying to throw shade because it's not always about graphics. I know I spoke about this a little bit beforehand, but here we have a couple screens from the newest Donkey Kong Bonanza game. And again, I kind of take a step back and I'm like, if it was to come out around that $700 price range, is this something that justifies to me $700? For me, probably not. I can certainly wait. I don't feel any FOMO right out the gate here, right? And I just feel like some things are just slightly off with the power here. It's not quite the power that we're looking at. And there's some double speak and double talk here, so keep that in mind. But certainly a couple of things just to hit some quick beats here, right? What I want to go over is the fact, again, box copies Nintendo Switch 2 Edition games only include the Switch 1 versions, as fans dismiss them as totally worthless, right? So I'm pulling this basically from metro.co.uk at their website here. Fans already suspected certain Nintendo Switch games would see enhanced upgrades on Nintendo Switch 2, and last week's big showcase confirmed that will indeed be the case. Dubbed the Nintendo Switch 2 Edition games, anyone who owns the original Switch 1 versions will be able to upgrade to them for a fee, while new customers will have to purchase them at full price. You would assume physical copies of these Switch 2 Edition games would come with Switch 2 cartridges, but as it turns out, that's not the case at all. So just more beats there. If you purchase a physical copy of the Switch 2 edition of the game, you're getting the original Switch 1 version instead, alongside a download code for the upgrade. Ergo, there are no physical versions of the Switch 2 edition games like we were talking about before. Now, as we keep going on here, there's other beats here, right? What are we doing here? How much are Nintendo Switch 2 edition games, right? There's also the matter of pricing. Nintendo Switch 2 games are more expensive than Switch 1 games. Nintendo has yet to provide official UK prices for all its first-party games, but physical copies of Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza for the US or UK versions, right? $74.99 and $66.99 respectively. And this could in turn continue to rise the gaming prices. They're the first ones out of the gates to do so. More will follow. But again, we had others try to bank that Sony did this for the $70 deals, not understanding 2K started this and other things will follow. It's not just one person or the other here. There's also, ultimately in the Treehouse broadcast, right? There were nonstop comments from viewers. They were demanding that the company drop the price. That's not a good look. And it seems like the opposite could end up happening for the console itself, at least in the US. Like I said, the tariffs could play a factor in that. So regardless if they were to listen to the community, to the fan base, for some of the fans anyways, drop that price, it's not going to really be dropped much for the US in that case. And again, that could be a problem if you are a US citizen looking to get this at a decent price. But another thing I want to mention here, guys, is the fact that they're starting to sound like Doug Bowser, and he used to be part of EA, by the way. He just recently also came out and said to the lines of, and again, paraphrasing here, but he's like, look, we understand not everybody can afford a Switch 2, but that's essentially why we still have Switch platforms out there for people to purchase and take part in at this point in time. So basically doesn't care about the pricing, doesn't care that people have concerns about the pricing. And does this look a little familiar maybe during the Don Matrick era for the Xbox One generation? And I'll post that quote up from there. During the Xbox One launch in 2013, then Xbox CEO Don Matrick famously stated that if consumers couldn't get online, this wasn't due to pricing, but DRM and all that, they should buy an Xbox 360, effectively suggesting the older console is an alternative for those who couldn't meet the Xbox One's always online requirements. Again, I think this speaks volumes in regards to Doug Bowser here. I think the name fits perfectly to be part of the Nintendo company, right, with Bowser, but the fact remains here that it's tone deaf. It's not gonna sit well with a lot of the fans out there. There's gonna be the diehards that would spend upwards of $1,000 for this system alone just because they're Pokemon fanatics, Legend of Zelda fanatics, Metroid fanatics, whatever the case is. You're always gonna have that hardcore base out there. However, again, very tone deaf, and they need to be very careful because this could turn around and bite them, much like it did for the Xbox One, and follow and garner negative attention, much that has continued to happen since the announcement there. How they didn't kind of benchmark that out, kind of Q&A the pricing out there with everybody, I don't know anyways in the first place, right? In regards to this, again, the tech in regards to the Switch 2 is more akin to the PS4, and that's being grateful, right? It can do certain things, but as you can see, certain textures and stuff, you got other cars and other instances, whether it be, rounded edges and stuff on certain other games they're showing, whether it be on, Mario Kart, or anything else. It's a little bit of suspect in regards to that. The things should be a little more fine-tuned. There's a lot of things that look great about this. I'm not trying to downtrodden that, but ultimately, that's where we're at. But again, sometimes when a company gets too big for their britches, much like when PS2 got too big for their britches, or PlayStation in general with the PS2 generation got too big for their britches, they came out with the PS3 cell processor, thought they could manhandle their way through there. We can do no wrong, all this stuff, and stumbled right out of the gate. Took them a few years to correct that footing, to do right to the consumers, and on. But it took some time. In the Xbox One generation, that didn't really happen. You got the forced connect, you had the always DRM right out the gate with the messaging, all sorts of stuff going wrong there. And it took them a long time to also kind of correct that. But at that point, it's too little too late. Microsoft couldn't help themselves. They didn't have enough of a fan base to cover that up, to recount for those mistakes. Where Nintendo, if they correct a lot of things right now out of the gate, they have the fan base. They clearly have the fan base that can kind of course correct this, right? They can course correct this, make the necessary adjustments, maybe not make such tone deaf statements and stuff like that, because that's not how you want to treat your consumers. You want consumers to branch out. You want them to buy your new hardware so you can ultimately, if there's more people that buy into the new ecosystem and the new hardware, the more powerful it is, the more that these other games can take advantage of that, and on and on and on. There's just a lot of benefits to have your fan base jump into that new generation of your console and ecosystem. It's just beneficial for all parties involved, but they do need to make some changes here, and if they don't, it is going to be very interesting to see how this pans out. It really is. Do they continue to stumble? Do they just stand tall and brace for impact and be like, we're going to weather this storm, it's going to be okay, we have enough fanatics and hardcore fanboys out there that we're going to be okay, we can kind of do what we want? But again, they have to look back to the Wii U generation and understand that they can't just do anything. Eventually people have had enough and they're not going to get the success that they thought they had, and that's coming out the hot gate that the Wii was, right? Whether that's due to the Wii Sports and stuff like that, whatever garnered that attention. But ultimately, it doesn't matter how big you are, you will fall if it's not done correctly. If it isn't done with a sense of care, a sense of pride that is good, though, for the brand. Not prideful sin, so to speak, but you're messing with a lot of stuff here. And I don't care if you're Microsoft, I don't care if you're PlayStation, I don't care if you're Nintendo, you can topple over. It doesn't matter how successful your previous generation was or how many successful generations you've had. If you don't bend to the consumer, if you don't respect the consumer, that's going to look bad for you, and it's not going to end up working well for you as a business or a brand, ultimately. But folks, let me know. I'll wrap up the video here, but certainly let me know down in the comments below what you think about all this. Anything changing for you as far as your outlook on Nintendo lately? Are you still planning to buy a Switch 2? Are you concerned about the direction they're going in? Are you okay with Doug Bowser's comments? All that stuff as well. Would love to hear from you. Both the likes and the comments help out the algorithm. Would love to hear from you, obviously, because there's a lot to kind of break down here. There's just a lot of uneasiness here, right? But that being said, of course, while wrapping this up, if you haven't already, definitely consider subscribing. Helping out a small content creator like myself does help out tremendously, so thank you all so much. On our way to that 3,500 sub goal. Really appreciate that. Enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. And we'll see you next time on the next Xvault Gaming video. And until then, take care.